I have to say the fact, and you make this quite clear in the documentary, the fact that you had so much primary source material was really, I think, maybe almost unique in any kind of terror attack that we had. We have the text messages, we have, you know, video of the victims the very night before they're killed. And here you have the prison interview. I mean, I'm just thinking, I'm sitting in Paris, where of course many people have been killed in terror attacks, and Rukmini, you yourself covered this. And of course there was no one left to interview. They were all killed, effectively.
Right.
So here you have the lead guy, the lead ISIS operative. You describe in the documentary that I think the word you used was complicated. That doing prison interviews is a complicated thing for us journalists, ethically, legally, on all sorts of levels.
Yes.
How uneasy were you during that interview, and are there things you came away with feeling, you know, maybe less than 100% okay with?
You know, because I cover ISIS, I've come to the conclusion that these primary interviews with members of the terrorist group are pretty much the most valuable tool that you have as far as a window into this entity. People assume that these terrorists just lie to you. Some do, but once in a while, and much more often than you would expect, you get real information from them, information that you can then that you can cross-reference with documents that you have gotten, with internal paperwork from the terrorist group. And that was very much what I feel I came away with from the Hussein interview. It bears noting that at several points in the Hussein interview, he would parrot this line, which was the government's line. He would explain to me how this was ISIS, and then out of the blue he would say something like, and this was actually organized by the opposition party by so and so. And his tone of voice would change, his eye movements would change. It felt clear to me that he was saying that because he felt he had to. That was the most indication I had of some form of coercion on his behalf. But there were also moments in the interview where it was clear to me that he had agency. There were questions he didn't want to answer. After some time, he got tired of the interview and asked for it to be over. And so I think the complexity with the situation is that many of these prisoners in Tajikistan, in Iraq, in Syria, are held in places that most likely do not uphold the standards of human rights. And so the question becomes, do they have free will, in this interview? Do they have a chance to say no? And that adds definitely a complication. But as somebody who's trying to learn about this group, once you're offered that interview, what are your choices? Your choice is to say, no, I'm not going to do it because of these complications, or I'm going to go and listen and decide whether this information is at some level valuable. And I think that we spent a lot of time thinking about it. And, I interviewed him for, I think, 3 hours. We didn't have, by any means, the room or the appetite really to go into the enormous amount of detail that he shared about his involvement with ISIS. But he walked me through the battalions that he joined once he was in Syria. He talked about the specific battlefields he was at, battlefields that I happen to know quite well because I was there covering the liberation, of those cities. And it was clear to me that he was speaking about an authentic experience. There was just way too much detail, about where he was in the city of Tal Afar in Iraq on this date, where he was in this place in Syria on that date, which I know corresponds with when ISIS was there. So I felt like we came away with something meaningful. And of course, like Singeli and others, I'm troubled to hear that he recently died in jail.
Yes. I would just add one thing is that he, it was after he'd been sentenced as well. And that was quite an important point, is that when we were there the first time, the trial was still ongoing. And it was after his sentencing that we were able to speak to him, which is a factor, I think, in weighing all of these decisions.